In 1995, Boss released the BD-2, the blues driver overdrive pedal. And from what I could tell, it wasn't an immediate hit, but over the years, it's grown in popularity among guitarists from novice to pro all the way around the world. But why a blues pedal at that time? Well, the mid-90s were an interesting time in the music industry. Grunge and alternative rock had become mainstream. The pop world was in the era of the Spice Girls and the Backstreet Boys, and hip-hop was experiencing a golden age. It was a time of extreme diversity in popular music, and guitar tones really varied anywhere from the clean and jangly tones of like Britpop to the heavy distortion of grunge and metal. But in the world of guitar gear, the 90s was a time when the gear industry was just starting to pay more attention to the concept of boutique pedals. Companies like Fulltone, Zvex, Analog Man, Way Huge, and others were just beginning to take off and change the guitar pedal world forever. Then the blues driver comes along. It was designed to emulate the tone of a vintage Fender tube amp, really being driven into a natural, smooth distortion, but with just a hint of fuzziness. Now, this was a sound that was difficult to achieve without cranking up a tube amp to ear-blistering volumes, and the blues driver offered a way to get this sound at pretty much any volume, making it great for bedroom practice as well as gigs and studio work. So from the start, the BD-2 was marketed as a pedal that could provide the touch and response of a vintage tube amp. And while the BD-2 was not a boutique pedal in the sense of like being handmade or produced in small quantities, it was part of a trend in the industry towards more specialized and like niche guitar tones. And in the years since its introduction, it's been proven to be a popular, much-loved pedal and remains in production today, of course, more than 2 decades, almost 3 decades after it was introduced. But the BD-2 blues driver has been used by a wide range of musicians over the years. For example, Mike McCready from Pearl Jam, Billy Joe Armstrong of Green Day, even guitarists like Joe Bonamassa have been known to use the BD-2 among many, many others. But what makes this pedal truly great? To answer that, we need to dig into some circuit nerdery. But don't jump ahead just yet, though. I won't get too technical here. Let's take a look at what's going on in the circuit here. And keep in mind, I'm not going to get super technical, but I think it's important to kind of understand like the basic building blocks of what's going on. So first of all, we have a buffer circuit that then goes into a discrete op-amp circuit. Now, instead of the little, 8-legged chip, this is transistors kind of doing the same thing in a more simplistic way, but it's still basically forming an op-amp. And then we have this, it's basically kind of like a Fender tone stack, like an amplifier tone stack, just with fixed values. And then we go through some diodes, or we should be clipping through diodes technically. And then we go into yet another discrete op-amp. And from there, we go into the tone control. Simple tone control, just basically takes off some highs. And then we go into the EQ circuit, which is boosting that bass. And that's basically it. On the Boss version, there's another buffer after that. That allows for like the electronic switching. So you don't have to do it on here because we're still pretty low impedance coming out of that EQ circuit. But with the Boss pedal, you got to have that buffer on the end in order to make all the bypass stuff work properly. So let's dispel some myths about the blues driver. So of course, in the name, you would think that it's a blues pedal like we talked about. It's not. In fact, I modified this particular blues driver for Brent Mason, huge Nashville session player, before we came out with the hot wired. So it was years and years ago, but I modified it for him. I think he used it on the Toby Keith song, Who's Your Daddy? And it's something like this. Something around that neighborhood. But, it is not just for blues. In fact, turn the gain knob all the way down, you get a nice little light crunch. And believe it or not, can do some metal with it too. So let me grab a different guitar because we gotta do a little Metallica or something, like old school Metallica. Turn that gain up all the way. And of course, it is nowhere near being a Tube Screamer clone or anything in any way related to a TS9. So another example, gain all the way up on the blues driver. Now let's dial in the drive on the Tube Screamer all the way up. Nothing like a Tube Screamer. Another myth, the blues driver and the blues breaker are nothing alike, and they're often confused. So I don't have an original blues breaker, but I do have a Morning Glory, which is pretty close to a blues breaker clone. So again, example of the blues driver. Nothing against the Morning Glory or the Blues Breaker circuit at all, but they're just completely different. Another thing is that the diodes on the actual blues driver circuit, they really, and I've made this mistake in the past, they really don't do a whole lot. You're driving the circuit really hard, and that is kind of what's making the distortion. So this, this is a mistake I've made in the past where I've done modifications to the diodes, thinking I was doing something incredibly different to the sound, and it's all pseudo stuff, right? I tricked myself because, once you get on the breadboard, you can do a lot of experimenting very easily, very quickly, and you can kind of dispel all those myths. And plus, we have the software that you saw a little bit earlier. You can kind of do all the math behind it and see what's really going on as well. Also, simple modifications like changing the stock film capacitors in this pedal. A lot of folks love to do it. Unless you're changing to a different value, you're really not going to get that much value out of changing to a different type of film capacitor. So I get it. It's fun. Just don't expect a big change if you're modifying a pedal and you're changing to the same value. Just a different type of film cap and a 9-volt pedal. Well, let's dive into some fun stuff and take a hands-on look at these circuits. So what you'll see here, I have several breadboarded circuits and, of course, the Boss Blues driver, the stock one. This particular breadboard is a circuit made by Dylan159 on freestompboxes.com, or I'm sorry, freestompboxes.org. It's called the Blues Pilot if you want to check it out. And it's basically just a simplified version using regular integrated op amps instead of the discrete op amps with all the transistors. It's really interesting because he's basically trying to simplify everything in order to get the same sound. Now, this particular breadboard right here, this is it's basically the stock circuit. I just breadboarded it all, so I can take stuff out and put stuff in and manipulate the circuit very quickly and very easily without soldering. These little doohickeys here, these are just boards that turn it on and off. All right, so let's play, first we'll play through the blues driver to give you kind of an idea of the sound again, and then we'll play through each one just briefly to give you an idea of how they're going to sound a little bit different. So some quick thoughts here on this Blues Pilot version of the Blues Driver circuit. It feels like it's a little bit less of that fuzz content that you hear with the normal Blues Driver, which you may like. Some people like that. Some people don't like that. They like the kind of the fuzzy aspect of the regular Blues Driver circuit. I think it's pretty cool that he really simplified the circuit quite a bit and came out pretty close. And I try to kind of adjust the tones just to ear to be about the same. So you may have a little bit more treble in one versus the other. That's just because I'm not using fixed resistors, just a regular tone pot. Now on the discrete version, the version that I breadboarded of the stock Blues Driver circuit, it sounds a little bit different as well. And I would attribute that to a little bit different of a FET type. I couldn't find the exact FETs that the Blues Driver uses, that couldn't find them in stock anywhere. So I had to use ones that were as close as I could find. And it seems like there's just a little bit less gain to it overall. And I would attribute that just to those transistors. And also a few minutes ago, I mentioned something about the diodes on this particular circuit here, on the breadboarded circuit of the stock Blues Driver. And I said that they really don't have that much of an impact because you're literally slamming one discrete op amp into another, driving it into distortion, kind of like you would do with a tube, where you're just driving the next tube harder, which drives the next tube harder, and so on, depending how much gain you want. So let me demonstrate that real quick. I'll put a switch in here that will switch between the stock diodes and these little bitty tiny, let's see if I can get it in the camera here, little bitty tiny BAT41 diodes, which they basically clip much easier than most other diodes. So it's a little bit more like a germanium where it just clips really quick. Really easily, much more than like your standard 41, 48 type diode, your standard stock diode found in most everything. Okay, I'm in stock mode with the diodes. So this is just the stock diode circuit that you would normally find in the Blues Driver. And when I flip the switch the other way, that's going to put those BAT41s, the diodes that clip very easily, into the circuit instead. So we'll see what the difference is. Right now, again, we're in stock. No difference. Not anything I can tell in the room. Now, there is another area that there are diodes, but these diodes aren't really for clipping. They're kind of to protect an EQ circuit at the end so it doesn't get driven into overdrive. But I know there have been mods that change these. Myself included have done this in the past. Let's demonstrate this in real time if those diodes actually make any difference. All right, here's my switch right here. We're in stock mode. When I flip this over, we'll go to the other diodes, the BAT41s. No big difference that I can see. And now the last test that we need to do regarding diodes, of course, is what if we take all the diodes out? There's no clipping diodes at all. Is it still going to sound the same? With most circuits, it will not at all. But let's see if the Blues Driver does. Right now, we're in stock mode, so all the diodes, all the stock diodes are back in the circuit. What's your thoughts? Do you hear a difference there? In the room, I'm hearing literally no difference. Sounds exactly the same, which tells me that those diodes aren't doing a thing really. One more thing, actually there's two more things I want to show you. The next one, we need to add an EQ. We can literally, if we were designing the pedal from scratch, we could do one of my favorite things I like to do to pedals, and that's add an active 3-band EQ to it. Let's see what happens. All right, this is a 3-band EQ. You'll see some other knobs, but the ones we're using, this is the mid-range, this is the bass control, this is the treble control. This is just a volume just to make sure I was unity gain. So for example, basically the same volume with everything at noon, just or in the middle, like you'd find on like a Boss EQ pedal. Let's take the blues driver, see what happens. Tons of bass available with that. So we've done a million videos on this. EQ is so incredibly flexible for, building guitar tones. It's one of those things that you may have a pedal that you kind of love, but you don't, or you kind of like, but you don't love. Adding a simple EQ pedal after it can really, really change it dramatically. And it's no different with the blues driver circuit. Just throw an EQ after it, and you can turn it into something completely different. So the last thing I want to do is I'm going to put the other breadboard back on here, and we're going to try to make it into a little more of a fuzz with just a few simple circuit changes. Here's a fairly quick fuzz circuit I just threw together just inside of the blues driver topology. Let's check it out. So what does make this pedal great? Well, the Boss Blues Driver is loved by many for several reasons. First, its versatility. The BD-2 can provide everything from subtle, transparent overdrive to cranked, warm, and chewy distortion, making it really versatile. And it can cover a wide range of styles and genres, not just the blues. And then its dynamic response. It responds really well to picking dynamics and changes in guitar volume just really well. The tonal quality, of course, the BD-2 is often praised for its warm, smooth, and creamy tones. It can provide a richness and a depth that was really quite different from most of the pedals on the market when it came out, and that still stands today. And the simplicity and the usability. It has 3 knobs, the level, tone, and gain, and it's easy to dial in the sound you want. The pedal's straightforward, really user-friendly, and so if you're the type that doesn't want to fiddle with a bunch of knobs or switches, you'll probably love it. Reliability. Now, like most Boss pedals, the BD-2 is built like a tank. It's sturdy, it's a reliable pedal that can stand up to heavy use, making it a great choice if you gig a lot or like if you accidentally drop it out of your gig bag and run over it in your car. Though, to be honest, I haven't tested that part yet. And value for the money. It sounds great, it's really versatile, and it offers excellent value for the money. While it's not a $30 budget pedal, it's more affordable than many overdrives on the market, and truly unique circuitry. As I've said in previous videos, Boss's engineering is fascinating. They often come up with truly unique ways to distort a guitar signal, and if you're into the more technical side of guitar pedals, I really encourage you to look up some schematics and study them. And another thing about it, it's a great platform for those that like to modify pedals. If you're like me and you love to take a brand new pedal, rip it apart and dissect it, well, you can not only learn about what's going on with it that way, but you can kind of color outside the lines and make it into something different. And this circuit is really wonderful for that. But that's it for this week's video. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Which version did you like best out of all the modifications we explored? And thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you're not subscribed, and we'll see you next time with a new video.